Hello and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. Today I will be chatting with Saul Luckman, a longtime researcher of shamanism and spirituality. Saul Luckman is an iconoclastic psychonaut devoted to exploring and exposing the truth about human history and potential wherever that might lead. I hope you enjoy the show.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to have a first-time guest on the show. You can't see him, but he's definitely there, I hope. His name is Saul Luckman, and I'd like to welcome him to the show. So how are you doing today, Saul? You okay?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing not too bad. I've spent most of the day reading your book. I'm about 50% of the way through it. You've got a new book coming out, Get Out of Here Alive. So yeah, I've been enjoying that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's interesting stuff. But before we do that, would you like to just tell the people a little bit about your background and what you're all about? I know you're a painter, a musician, lots of things, a philosopher, an author. So would you like to give people a little bit of background?
Yeah, maybe a micro bit of background. It gets so boring, just to go through your background. But, I come from a humanities background, academics, was an English teacher at one point, and I got sick years ago from certain medical interventions that we're all too familiar with. I nearly died. I went into a serious autoimmune phase of my life that went on for the better part of a decade, and I was able to figure out how to heal myself using a kind of sound healing technology that I developed. I say technology, it's a human-based technology, but it's a technology of sorts. So that was how I kind of entered the realm of writing about very esoteric concepts and cutting edge and sometimes fringe science and other interesting subjects having to do with Gnosticism and simulation theory and that sort of thing. I kind of went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and that culminated in this latest book, Get Out of Here Alive, which is the ultimate rabbit hole because it's really about the ultimate subject, which is death and the afterlife. So here we are. I really appreciate you having me on. I know we have a mutual acquaintance, Dawn, and so I want to give a shout out to her, Dawn Lester, who's a great writer in her own right. She has been a good buddy of mine for a while, so I appreciate her putting us in contact and you for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. We were already friends on Facebook, although I didn't know a great deal about you. Somehow I've acquired you as a friend, as you do on Facebook, but I'm certainly I've seen a few of your posts, but I've enjoyed going further into your work since we've arranged that interview. So yeah, thanks to Dawn for making the connection. I think you've seen me interview her just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't the first time you interviewed her. I remember during COVID, you guys had a chat that I tuned into, and I was really appreciative of that. So I've kind of been aware of you and your channel for a little while.
Yeah, basically, I was very pleased to find Dawn and David's book at the start of COVID, because again, it was the exposing germ theory right at the beginning. So it was quite important. And then that kind of inspired me from interviewing them to start doing a shooting the shit show where I would grab all these memes up and try and, because I've got 30 years of rabbit hole experience, to try and tell the public, there's more going on here than meets the eye, because it was a kind of wake-up point for a lot of people. But I done 319 of those shows, and I've not done them for a while because it's a little bit about what you're talking about in your current book. It's like I felt like I was just regurgitating the kind of Matrix stuff, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I mean, you can only go around in circles and talk about Elon Musk and Trump for so long before people can't get the fact that, they're not there to benefit you, and they're all, in the gang, whatever you want to call it. Then
right.
I kind of burnt myself out a little bit as well, but yeah, I just got to, and plus also Facebook, for a while there, I was getting 100 viewers a show, and then they decided to put that down to 3 or 4 or whatever, because they don't, shadow ban you and all that stuff. So you're fighting the forces of these tech giants. When they want to shut you up, they will. So I was getting too much of an audience, I think. So now I just do my thing myself. But yeah, would you like to just talk a little bit about your book then? From what I've gathered so far, it's quite a lot about we create our own reality almost, and what we focus on, we get more of, and all this stuff out there outside of ourselves is actually taking away our loose energy and our focus, and it's all like one layer. You think you're awake, but that's just another kind of trap. Is that kind of what you're meaning in this book?
Yeah, that's a big aspect of where I'm coming from. The concept is that we are food for an apex predator of sorts that feeds on our conscious energy, and that renders us more and more unconscious because our energy is taken away from us. And so when we think we've woken up and we're truthers and we figured out the truth, we're almost always in another mental snare, in this very very malleable construct that we blithely call reality.
Yeah, I mean, the opening chapter of your book is kind of goes into a little bit about the quantum world, and how it's like the macro and the micro, and you go into like nuclear physics and stuff, taking it down to particles and stuff like that. We just had a guest on the show. I think it was just before I had Don on, maybe just after, Steve Young. I don't know if you've heard of his work.
I have.
He's a kind of nuclear physicist type, quantum. He's a doctor in that field. His latest book, A Fool's Wisdom, is kind of saying that that's all just make believe, really, and it's all theories on a blackboard, but it's nothing based in the real world.
That's what I'm basically saying as well, is that it's all a construct of consciousness. I mean, we can think about logic and its kind of, weird stepchild rationality as the ultimate truth, but really it's just one version of a quote unquote truth. I invite readers to think that there are various kinds of logic depending on what dimensional setup you're in. If you go out and you're dreaming in another world that feels very real to you, because you're experiencing it just like you were experiencing this world, and it feels real to you, you probably had the experience that the rules are very different in different dreaming contexts, and that's because you're in different frequency ranges and having different experiences, and you have to adapt to the different logic of that particular setup. And our logic has kind of been reduced to what we call rationality, which is just a narrowing of the bandwidth to some bare bones, the 5 senses and the material realm, Newtonian physics, this kind of thing. And to its credit, the quantum sciences have expanded our curiosity into zones of so-called reality where there are different rules at work. That's the kind of interesting aspect of it. But it doesn't mean that they're touching on some kind of ultimate truth. Really, the quantum sciences have just opened up a kind of Pandora's box. And when we look inside that, we see that we live in a multiverse full of possibilities, and all those possibilities can be accessed by application of our awareness. This is why when scientists have studied, the particle wave duality, it's all important whether they're focused on those energies as waves or particles, because they actually are creating that outcome.
Yeah, I mean, something like, for instance, the number 33, if you think of that, and you start to see it, and then all of a sudden you're seeing it everywhere. It's like, was it always there, or are you creating? Every time I look at the clock is 33, and all this kind of thing. It's like, what we consider outside of ourselves is actually inside our head anyway. And just the consciousness has an effect on the experiment, so to speak. They say that, don't they? So
for sure.
we have all this focus on the external all the time, and the rules and the narrative that gets put out there. But I think you call it the dragon, the top of the kind of the head of the loosh thing. It seems like they've got a set narrative that we want everyone to believe, like the Earth is a spinning ball, or whatever it is. Free energy is not a thing. It's to kind of keep us trapped in a lower vibration. We're kind of giving our loosh energy to this being. What would you describe as the dragon that you're talking about, and why is it doing this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The basic concept here is that it's very much like the Gnostics thought that we lived in a realm ruled by a force that they called the Archon, the Lord Archon, the Demiurge, different names for it. And it's basically the false god of this world that people worship. It's really, really strange, as some benevolent god. When in fact, if you look at the history of the Old Testament God, I mean, we're really talking about some kind of ET who's sacrificing children and blowing up cities. I mean, it's really crazy, really. So, I mean, the narrative changes a lot in the New Testament to the current Bible's credit, because then you get into a much higher vibration with the whole Jesus and Christ narrative. There are lots of issues around that as well, but at the very least, we don't appear to be talking about the same being as much anymore when we get into the New Testament. And so that's something to be thankful for. So really, we're in a play it as it lays scenario where we just have to understand that we are being utilized, kind of like in the Matrix, as batteries to power up a reality construct. And our attention is being mimetically steered. It's using this dragon force uses our own attraction to other people's beliefs, including its own installed beliefs in our minds, to change outcomes, to direct massive attention and energy into specific scenarios that it wants to create. So we wonder why political battles are always 51% to 49%. Everything is so close. Everyone is so divided. Is that even statistically possible for this to happen year after year after year? Absolutely not. It's part of the construct. And this division, this purposely designed imbalance in what we think of as reality, is there to destabilize our consciousness, to put us into fear, fight, or flight mode, and to harvest our energy, which I call loosh, like some other people call it. And I define that as our consciousness as it's being extracted from us and becoming unconscious, so that we lose it. We lose that mojo. We lose that consciousness. It's taken from us and it's utilized for other purposes.
So basically, we're giving our power away all the time instead of looking inward and seeing what we want to create. We're voting. It's got like energy, a volt, giving your energy, your power to someone else to make decisions, rather than you taking ownership.
It's true. It's true. I mean, the plot thickens when you consider the possibility that I also mention in this book, that our minds, our conscious minds, and you haven't finished the book, so you don't see where this leads, but there's a very interesting conclusion that I won't get into here. If people want to check that out, they can, and they can download the book for free as a review copy. So that's cool. But the concept here is that what we think of as our own mind is not our mind. It is the dragon's mind. We don't have a conscious mind that is our own yet. Now, it's possible, and I touch on this, to get there where you actually harmonize your conscious mind with your unconscious mind, and you become much more than you thought you could ever be. I believe that is sort of the path of achieving human potential in my way of seeing things. But we start out from a place where that voice in your head is literally not your own voice.
So basically, it sounds a little bit like the Matrix, where Neo eventually, conquers the Matrix almost. You're trying to get to that point where when you're born into the construct, because I know you kind of allude to the thing that, like, this dragon creature is, as you say, it is what we think is us. But because I look at a lot of people, and you're like, they're just a program of the Matrix, I would call it. They literally have no idea who they are. They just repeat what's on the television, and they've not done any work on themselves to try and find out who they are. And then, you've got to deal in this reality with these people. But you're saying we've all kind of got that to a certain extent, and it's really a massive journey to try and get full control of ourselves totally, to be able to probably, some people call this like a trap, would that allow us to kind of free this realm? And is that the purpose of this realm?
I would say absolutely yes. I think of this as a dojo, and I've also used the analogy of the classroom, but I like the dojo because it gets back to the Matrix a little bit, and it's really in that dojo. You have Morpheus with Neo, and Morpheus is just kicking Neo's ass, absolutely, and that's where we are when we start out with the dragon. It's just kicking our ass, and we are here to become empowered and to become more than merely human, basically, to go beyond these limits. And I think that's what we have in some ways set up for ourselves in the prehistory of our species as our task. And that's what all the great metaphors, including the hero's journey, come back to, is this journey of transmutation of the self. So here we are on our own hero's journey. And that's really as big as it gets, because it includes facing the end of the line of the hero, which is death, and actually figuring out how to transcend death. That's the ultimate path. And again, we see this in scripture. We see this in mythology. This is constantly coming back again and again. And you had, the Egyptians were absolutely obsessed with this motif. So, this is not a modern problem. It's a human problem. And, mortality is the human problem. And we are here, I think, to attempt to solve it. And I offer potential solutions in this book for doing just that, as amazing as that might sound.
So you think that basically there is a way for us all to get out here at once, or will this realm always be here for that purpose, and it's up to the individual souls to leave it, periodically? I mean, there is, people talk about having a reset in different epochs and stuff here, where the reality might be totally different, but do you think it's always served that kind of purpose?
It's very possible. It's very, very possible. The narrative that I put forward is that we went from being a species that was rooted in the unconscious mind, and we had a kind of collective mind. It was extremely powerful and super networked. This would be the dream time, for example. And the narrative that I put forward in the book is that we in the dream time dreamed of becoming more than that. And this is where we get the motif of the tree of knowledge. We ate of that fruit. We invited a serpent into the garden. The serpent was the dragon. And this dragon was a creature from the dream world, from the dream time, from the great dark sea of awareness surrounding whatever this place is. And it kind of swam on in and decided to create this loosh farm by installing its mind in our mind as our operating system. So if you want to look at the biblical story of the Garden of Eden, essentially what was happening there, if I can map it onto my storyline, is that the humanity symbolized by Adam and Eve wanted to become more. They were willing to accept the apple, which was the conscious operating system of the dragon, in order to have an experience of individual consciousness. In so doing, that suppressed their knowledge of the greater aspect of themselves, that would be the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
So that leaves us at a place of figuring out how to to clean up the conscious mind, get rid of that voice, sweep it clean, and then marry it again with the unconscious mind so that we can step into the fullness of our power.
So when you say, yeah, clean up the conscious mind, there seems to be a lot of negativity. Like, for instance, the news, or you walk into a supermarket and they've got the newspapers sitting there. So even if you're not interested, as you're walking by, your subconscious mind is taking that in. You know, it just seems to be a lot of negativity, basically, to keep us probably in fear. Is that almost like a challenge for us to power up and to overcome this? Or do we consciously then have to choose, you know, I'm not watching the news at 10 tonight. I'm becoming more selective where I put my attention so that we can power up, because otherwise fear seems to be controlling a lot of people, and it's almost the design of the construct to keep us that down.
Yeah, I mean, you had asked earlier, does the construct change? Yes, I think this history of resets and all of this, bizarre information that's been emerging is telling the story of the nature of the construct, which is basically something that can be changed with the sort of the push of a button. I don't mean that technologically. I just mean that the dragon is kind of like the mind flayer. It's in everyone's minds, and it can change the reality that people are perceiving and creating by steering our consciousness. So when it does that, there's a reset. It changes everything, and it can do it over and over and over again. And it can do it in response to human consciousness. And what I mean by that is that there might have been times when human consciousness was greater and more powerful, or more aligned, less cluttered, less divided, and it might have been, we might have called that something like a golden age in comparison to where we are right now. And that created a playing field where the dragon had to kind of back off a little bit, and we were able to have more free reign. But as we give away our power more and more, the dragon is able to close the noose around us more and more and more, until we say, you know, we're done with that and we're going to reverse that trend. So I think there's a possibility that this place could always be here, and it could always be changing relative to mass consciousness, which is, you know, in flux. But because really you're still talking about one gigantic being called humanity. They just don't realize that they're one gigantic being. In the dream time, they understood that they were one gigantic being, and that created enormous power, but it also did not give you the option to experience individuality in the way that we think of it.
So in the dream time, do you think that was like probably just like the dreams that we actually have just now is more lucid, and it's almost like the individuality is like Bill Hicks would talk energy condensed to a slow vibration, so we form like what we call physical bodies, and time would appear to be, you know, slower and more physical, like treacle, as opposed to when you dream, things are happening quicker. Is that what you kind of mean?
I don't know for sure what that would have been like. I wrote a book years ago, a novel called Snooze, A Story of Awakening was the subtitle. And it was about the interface between space-time, where we live, and time-space, which would be kind of the other world or the dream time. And the main character goes in search of his father, who's gotten stuck in the dream world. And so there's an entire, 200 pages spent in this dream world. And the way I theorized it was that it was kind of the inverse of everything we have here. So that, up is down, our outer senses are actually our intuitions there, and vice versa when you come back across. I was using Dewey Larson's physics, his reciprocal system of physical theory, as the scientific, quote unquote, backbone for understanding what that realm might be. But in that society, as I depicted it, there's a great deal more harmony and understanding of how people are related, and they greet each other like this. They say, "I see myself in you." And so they have a very real-time understanding that they are extensions of each other. It's not just that, I see who you are. It's more like, I see that you are me.
If people seeing the world like that, would, love thy neighbour as themselves, is kind of Bible way of putting it, because we're always, it's divide and conquer seems to be a big play going on these days as well.
No doubt.
So do you think there's like maybe periods in time where there's like a figure of 8 or something, and the top half of the 8 small, and that's like a utopia period, and then it kind of a long, slow time of like Satan has his time or something like that, what they would call Satan, just so it's like high vibration and then dropping down, golden age, bronze age, and silver age kind of looping. Do you think that's a possibility? So maybe coming into another age just now where consciousness seems to be rising again.
The concept of the yugas would seem to support that. It's very possible. I don't know if the movement through those types of experiences is as mathematical or geometric as all of that. These myths or these stories about yugas and ages may just be very rudimentary ways of understanding a much more jagged and organic process of becoming.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say about free will then? I've got a question from a lady called Anna in the chat. She's just saying, ask about free will in regards to having our own consciousness.
So do we have our own consciousness?
Well,
do we have free will? I'm seeing her questions here. So let's see. Billy, ask this man about our free will in regards to not having our own consciousness. When I was 7 years old, I got a sense this place is a dream, and I was dreaming this place. I mean, that's beautiful. Yes, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that it's all a dream. You don't go into the dream world when you dream, you just go into a different part of it because it's all a dream. This is source dreaming itself into different experiences.
Yeah, I told you I've had a little bit of chat via text setting this interview up, and I said to you I've recently took some 5-MeO DMT.
Yeah.
And I've been having some dreams after that are just unbelievable. It's like I woke up in a field of grass. Well, I thought I was in a field of grass. I could physically feel this grass, I was lying in. And I opened my eyes like that. Am I lying in a field of grass here? It was my bed, but it seemed unbelievably physical, that place. And you have some very vivid dreams these days that it makes me feel as though it's another reality. Not, there's more to it than just a dream. It's like something going on there.
Yeah, that's really cool. It makes me think about one of the things that I've been studying and learning and beginning to teach a little bit. It's a way of projecting your consciousness into different what I call mental chambers, and you basically learn how to master a certain level of the stacked nature of your consciousness. It's like going through the shamanic dreaming gates, if you've read any of that in Castaneda. And the goal is to get to where you can enter into what appears to be just a mental projection, something that you are imagining, and it becomes so real that your consciousness imparts such power to it that it literally becomes real, and it begins to move and function separate from your direction, so that you begin to have a lucid dream, but you've never fallen asleep.
Interesting.
And it's very fascinating because I keep working on this ability, and I've been making some really good progress. It's taken me a while, and it is phenomenal. But it leads me to believe that yes, back in the dream time, for instance, people were basically having much more of a lucid dream type of experience. But it wasn't because they were asleep all the time. It was because they were processing reality with a full knowledge of how they could just project their consciousness into experience.
So some people these days, talk about you create your own reality. And, like for instance, I've got some things I want to do, but you've got bills and stuff to pay in a slave job. And, you feel like you're tied to that because we need these things to survive. And although I'm working on other things, I don't know, never seem to manifest or whatever. How do you make the leap from, this? I think money is a big tool of control of people, and you're an artist. I don't know if you can live off your art or if you've got another form of income, but I don't know. That just seems to be something that's holding us back in this world because it's essentially we could grow the food and everyone could share it amongst ourselves. How do you manifest your desires, or do you want to then go into yourself and ask, no, what you desire as an ego, more of how can I serve people, and would that be a better way to create your reality? Working with the kind of flow rather than I want this and trying to create it, if you know what I mean.
You've read, you said the first half of the book, and I go into different strategies for sort of unplugging from the matrix, right?
Yeah.
The idea being that, and we can talk about money as well, but the idea being that you have all of these siphons on your attention and your energy. And a lot of these are in the form of social media interactions and social media addiction and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, really, this path involves almost a kind of initiation where you wean yourself off of a lot of that. I'm not saying entirely, but where you take back control of your time, and that puts you back in your own. It puts you closer and closer to the center of your own consciousness, where you can hear yourself more clearly, and you can begin removing yourself from situations that are constantly draining your energy. Just by doing that, your energy increases. And energy and consciousness are the same thing in this discussion. So your consciousness is actually increasing. So your ability to see solutions to your life circumstances begins to change because you're able to raise yourself to a different vibrational level and perspective. That presents lots of benefits and advantages to where compared to where you were just a few months earlier when you began doing this process. And beyond that, I teach several different techniques for really powering up and gathering and condensing and storing power very rapidly that allows you to create what you might call miracles in your life, or just very magical serendipities that can begin to happen and change your life dramatically in a very short period of time. When this can include the financial realm, where you get out of the kind of grind it out mentality into a more magical space where things just start to happen. And I'm not saying it does this every time, or that it's easy, or that it's consistent. But the exercise of this kind of attention power that I'm describing can make it more and more and more consistent. And you can actually consciously will a lot of these things into your experience.
Yeah, it's quite good advice. I did, yeah, again, I'm enjoying the book and I'm noticing some things. You did say, social media, like might have been Dawn or somebody recently I was talking to, just how you can go on Twitter and you can feel yourself getting stressed just by going through these things just appearing on the timeline, and that's affecting your energy. And yeah, I don't spend a lot of time in it, and I feel there's all these Telegram groups these days where everybody wants to be right and look at this, look at this, look at this. And yeah, again, I'm just actually focusing on doing my own thing. And
yeah, I respect that. I really respect that.
Because at the end of the day, you can only affect those in your sphere, I think. And it's very hard, I think you actually mentioned in the book, to save the world, which I did as Messiah complex a little bit. I watched Bill Hicks back in the day, and there was like, oh, I can do that. And then I started ranting at people, But, yeah, unfortunately, it didn't get me many laughs, but I felt better at the time. But, yeah, then I just realised, it's all about, making people laugh, I thought was a good way, or, and entertaining them. Well, that's why I do comedy and poetry and stuff like that, is to try and bring some transmuting of all this crap, and to talk about it, but to loosen its kind of power over people. because they take it very seriously. People take the world very seriously, and I think we should lighten up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is that Chesterton quote? Angels can fly because they take themselves lightly.
Yeah, it's a good one. And some of your things, apart from the social media, you're always also talking about dance. And there's quite a good one in the book about dancing makes you look ridiculous, but then not dancing makes you look ridiculous too. So you may as well dance. It's like if a party's going off and everyone's dancing, you're standing there like that. Who's sticking the mud?
Right.
So
And using that as a metaphor for just living your life fully and doing it as best you can on your own terms. You might as well, because you're going to be ridiculous either way if you look at it through that lens.
Well, I've always had the philosophy that we're going to die one day, so you might as well experience life and, do crazy stuff. For sometimes I've pushed it a bit too far, usually through drinking drugs probably, but, but at the same time, I've still got that thirst for life. And I think a lot of people lose the joy that you have as a child. It kind of gets kicked out of you. And they lose that playfulness or the inquisitiveness that school, I think, does a good job of making learning seem boring. So therefore, you just put the TV on and watch football rather than go and play football. It's that kind of passiveness that people don't seem to experience things, especially with the mobile phones these days as well. That's got people just staring at a screen instead of having experiences. And from those experiences, they can learn, grow, and change. Where staring at a phone, there's not a lot of personal growth going on.
It's so true. The second Incredibles movie, the animated movie, the villain was called the Screen Slaver.
Yep.
A lot of food for thought there.
Uh-huh. And you talk about silence as well, because the world is quite noisy, and we're picking up on, again, the media shouting things at us constantly if you put the TV on. So what part of silence, and again, that's part of the unplugging, I think you were alluding to there, yeah?
Sure. I don't mean this in any dogmatic or religious way. It has nothing to do with Buddhism. It's basically just returning to an area where you can begin to collect your own feelings and thoughts, and again, pull away from being basically energy harvested. You can build up your power that way. I use a couple of figures in American history that have been very influential for me to illustrate the power of silence. One is Henry David Thoreau, who retired to the woods at Walden and kind of dropped out of the world in many ways. He figured out how to support himself by working only a day a week, and the rest of the time he spent writing, and he wrote extremely influential texts, essays, that sort of thing, that ended up, like his work on civil disobedience ended up inspiring Gandhi and essentially helped free India of British imperialism, which is wild to even consider. Just really amazing. And there's another fascinating figure called Peace Pilgrim, a woman who was a flapper back in the flapper era in the 20s and into the 30s, who just changed dramatically and began walking all across the country carrying basically nothing, not even any money, and just depending on the goodwill of others and having this magical experience. She ended up being the first woman to hike the full length of the Appalachian Trail in one go, and all of these things that she was accomplishing had to do with basically promoting peace through a lifestyle of nonviolence and also silence, because she was just walking in the woods by herself most of the time. And so she created so much around her. There have been books written about her just by going into silence and into simplicity.
As you also talk about, if you have a conflict with someone, the best thing sometimes to do is just to be quiet, because if you just keep talking back, it just puts fuel in the fire. I actually had a disagreement with a neighbour, and I said my piece, and then I told him, don't ever talk to me again, because I just don't want to deal with it, and shouting at him is not going to do any good. So yeah, I just
Yeah.
think people can learn a lot from just, achieve more sometimes by saying nothing.
Well, the idea is that this force that we were calling the dragon earlier pits us against other people and uses our emotional responses to drain our energy. So, obviously when that's happening and you are expelling all of this energetic fuel into an argument that's just a kind of a bonfire, or it's a combustible situation. So the best way to simmer it down is to stop pouring gasoline on the fire. And when you do that through silence or stepping away, then sometimes it just magically changes the dynamic and the argument just kind of fizzles, or people are finally are able to kind of go their own way and think about things, and maybe they reconvene and they work it out or whatever. But it's not because of some psychological effect primarily. It's because you take back your energy. The energy it does everything. It's the building block of what we call reality. So you're literally taking that essential fuel that is fueling a reality situation, and you're re-internalizing it. And I actually teach techniques for doing this even in real time when you're in the middle of an argument, where you can suck back in your own energy. You can reabsorb it. And very often it will stop the argument in its tracks. It's very bizarre. And you get to reclaim that energy that otherwise would go to the dragon, and it would feed its power and its ability to create this crazy construct of the matrix that we're in.
Mm-hmm. You talk also about truthers, and basically there's a lot of truthers out there who are making money, I guess, and like Alex Jones is one that springs to mind. And although he's ranting a lot what he would call the truth and people are on board with it, it seems to be very negative based and, not achieving much other than get people angry. So what would you say is the trouble with truthing then, and truthers in general? And it's almost like a cult that gets formed around these people.
It's true. The last book I wrote that was kind of the springboard for this current book was called The World, Cult, and You. So I really looked at this from the cult angle, and I determined and explained my position that basically the world is just a gigantic cult made up of all kinds of subcults, and the cults are designed to extract people's energy and control them. So what you just said made all the sense in the world. The real problem with truthing is that where is this truth that you're talking about? Is it your truth? Is it my truth? A bunch of different people can see the same event and interpret it completely differently. You can play the telephone game, and this message gets passed around the room, and it's incomprehensible by the time it gets back to its starting point. So what is this truth? And what is this reality in a world that our best scientific minds have determined is nothing but quantum waves of energy? Where is the bedrock? Where is the truth here? Where is the truth when so many people can't even agree on the nature of pathogens, or whether such things even exist, and they will argue with each other forever? I ended up determining, even though my sympathies lie with the terrain movement, and I supported that concept because it's more empowering to people, and I like the idea of being in harmony with nature and not being a victim all the time to little organisms getting in my system. Okay, so I made a conscious decision in some ways to just adopt that as a way of looking at the world. But what I ultimately determined about that ongoing argument is that both sides are right and both sides are wrong, because they're just creating their own version of reality. I think this happens at the scientific level. I think people who believe in pathogens can create them and can be affected by them. And I think that people who ultimately turn away from that are invulnerable to them. That's the bottom line. I'm not saying in every single case, if you have somebody who's saying they don't believe in them, and then all of a sudden they get sick with something, that necessarily works, because you might have psychological subconscious factors or whatever. But if you truly invest in creating your reality in the way I'm describing, and you decide that they don't exist for you, then they don't really.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do. Well, I think Don and David would call it the kind of nocebo effect. They would say,
Yes.
see someone having what they call a flu, whatever, so they think, oh, it's contagious, and therefore they'll maybe ultimately they're triggering their own detox process.
Sure.
process.
It could be through something like the
contagious.
nocebo. I mean, you're right about that. It could be nocebo, and I've certainly written about this this concept a lot. But it could also be much weirder than that, where people are literally side by side experiencing different versions of reality, and that's why they can't understand each other. That's why when you get Jeremy Hammond and Mercola and all these people who appear to be intelligent people arguing for the existence of these pathogens, the terrain people are like, you're just speaking gobbledygook, and vice versa. The other party feels that way about the terrain people. Is this because there's nobody who's right in a scenario like that? What both parties of truthers don't realize is that they live in a construct that is a fabrication of their attention and awareness.
Well, basically, if you think, oh no, I can catch a cold, you've got it, I'll stay away from you, or, I'm going to catch it, then there's a likelihood you'll catch it. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll have the symptoms because they think they can catch it, is what you're saying.
And I'm saying that the mechanism may be something more than just mind over matter or some kind of nocebo effect. It may actually be that for you, you're living in a world where there are different operational principles.
All right. Yeah. That is quite deep. In this world, you talk about authenticity and facelessness. That's a chapter of one of your. That's the title of one of your chapters. What do you mean by that? Facelessness.
Well, that's why I don't put my face out there. So, I go into that in some detail. The idea here related to this discussion and the thesis of this book that our biggest goal is really to create energy, is that when you plaster your selfies all over the internet, for example, basically you're just creating a lot of energetic ties to other awarenesses who can loose you, who can siphon off from you. And this idea of having your soul stolen is very much aligned with that. This kind of Native American view. I think there were many peoples around the world who felt this way, but the idea that your image was kind of sacred, and that by putting it out there, by having it captured, something was being actually drawn from your vital essence that wasn't good for your health or your mental health or your well-being. Maybe they were really onto something. So I've just never wanted to play that game. I've also never wanted to make my work about me and my personality and my face. I wanted it to always be about the work, the ideas. And I felt that the best way of doing that was to not make it about me. And we are living in a kind of apotheosis of narcissism and inauthenticity right now. And it's very funny to me that people would assume that, just because you don't share your image, that means you're not authentic. I argue that the exact opposite is probably the case, that people putting their image out there are more likely to be inauthentic.
Well, in these days of influencers, there's a lot of, pictures taken that are very inauthentic when they're claiming they are, on a fancy boat or whatever, and maybe green screen and all this kind of stuff, or they've lost weight, but had operations and they've not done a fitness program. And, basically, I mean, I'm screwed because I've got millions of pictures of me out there, but I'm being quite authentic in them.
Yeah, I mean, one can be authentic in any circumstance, and I absolutely don't want to, be misunderstood on that particular point. It's just that certain circumstances are more conducive to authenticity than others. And being on stage in front of a public is not conducive to authenticity, generally speaking.
Yeah, well, again, I've tried the stand-up comedy world, and I did try to be authentic, and people can't handle it because, they've got an act, so to speak, whereas I try to be real. And, yeah, I've been banned for everywhere because I say words you're not supposed to say, for instance. In fact, I got pulled off stage for literally saying, I was alluding to this. I was I've got a joke about the N word, and I never actually said the N word. I said literally the N word, and I got pulled off stage for saying that. And it's just a whole shit show. And yeah, to me, comedy is dead because the politically correctness and all that stuff, you know, and what you can and can't say. People are just got it on their head. This, so you can't say that, you can't do this. Whereas you can't just be real. So yeah, you get cancelled and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'm very aware of those dynamics. To me, that is a development of this looshing strategy that's being used by the Dragon in its divide and conquer game.
Yeah, it's doing a good job.
Yeah.
And it's pretty bad. What you'd also say about procrastination, a secret to unlocking your creativity. What do you mean by that?
All of these contrarian ideas. Yeah, the idea is that of using procrastination is that when we are in this go mode, we are living outside of ourselves. Once again, we're projecting our awareness, our attention, our focus outside of where it needs to be, which is inside of ourselves. And when we go inside and we just allow our mind some freedom to be and to go where it wants to go, very often that is the moment when we have some kind of breakthrough. We have a really great idea for a book, or we come up with an invention, or who knows what. And this happens over and over and over. It's a beautiful strategy. I know that, for example, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb by using a similar technique where he would put some kind of object in his hand, something heavy, and he would hold his hand inside a metal trash can, and he would recline in his recliner until he was just about to go to sleep, and he would enter that sort of hypnagogic state where he would get the idea, and then and his hand would relax. He would drop the ball. It would make a loud noise. It would wake him up. And so he was using an interiority technique to access breakthrough concepts. So this is one of the reasons why it's a really good idea to do nothing sometimes, to do what the great writer Brenda Euland called moodling, spend time moodling, and get off of the need to create, to go, to do, and allow the well to fill back up. That's a great Hemingway metaphor. Allow your creative well to fill up.
Yeah, he's got some quite interesting quotes for helping creativity. I've seen a few of them. What about the shadow? What is the shadow then, and how do we embrace that?
So lots of people have written and talked about the shadow. In recent years, that's become pretty widespread, at least in certain demographics and communities. Jung talked a lot about the shadow, this unacknowledged part of ourselves that is, it's variously seen, but it is essentially, as I understand it, it's sort of it's the place that we suppress all of the things that we don't like about ourselves. And we tend to project those onto other people. And this would be another malfunction, if you will, of our conscious mind, which is really the Dragon's operating system that we're using. So the way it works is that it divides our own consciousness. It has us judge aspects of ourselves, push them down, and then project those onto others. That creates conflict, and the conflict can't be resolved because we can't acknowledge that we're creating the projection that is creating the situation that we're dealing with. So we're just loosed all the time by our own fragmented consciousness. So a really powerful strategy to take back your energy and your consciousness is to begin delving into the aspects of yourself that you really don't like and don't care to acknowledge, and just simply owning them. There are lots of different strategies for making friends with the shadow and learning to judge yourself less and love yourself more. But really, that's what we're talking about here as a starting point. Beyond the typical definition of the shadow is a notion that there is a much greater aspect of ourselves that is a kind of shadowy aspect that I call it various things, but in citing the work of John Kreider on inner alchemy, I call it the ghost in the machine. And that's a you probably haven't gotten that far in the book. When you do, you'll see how it ties the realms of the conscious and the unconscious minds together. It's really fascinating. The learning to work with your magical child. This would be the alchemical child of alchemy. This is the luminous child of Gnosticism. This is probably the light body, the rainbow body. It is this magical part of ourselves that came about when we accepted the dragon's operating system, that suppressed our unconsciousness. And when it did that, it created a third aspect of our consciousness, which is the mediator between those two worlds. And this is this ghost in the machine. And it's the magical part of ourselves. It's that quantum part. It's why we can heal at a distance. It's why we can know who's calling when the phone rings. It's why we know we're being stared at. It is because it transcends this physical realm and our material bodies and operates non-locally. And once we begin to work with the magical child, we can unite the conscious and unconscious aspects of ourselves and truly create miracles.
I look forward to reading that. But just when you're talking there about the shadow, I think a lot of times people, I think you alluded to, they say things about other people, but it's actually advice they should take themselves. But they're projecting it outwards rather than, people listen to their own words. They've probably solve a lot of their own problems sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really true. And that sounds kind of, proverbial and just like common sense, but most people actually don't do it. And it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. And it's hard to do it consistently. And it's difficult to do when your dander is up, when you're in the moment, to actually see clearly enough to see how you are fanning the flames of a conflict with your own unacknowledged aspects. That's really some strong medicine. But if you can do it, you can change things so profoundly in terms of your interactions and just your life in general that it will amaze you.
Yeah. I know you don't want to give away kind of the end of the book, because I know you go to the Philosopher's Stone, and I've heard a few other interviews you've done where you maybe allude to just this is getting out of this world, get out of here alive, basically. It's like taking your consciousness with you. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I talk about alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone, and I define what the Philosopher's Stone is. And I say that this idea that it's some kind of rock that you hold in your hand that grants eternal life is just silly. That's really that's the window dressing on a much more complex and interesting subject. And that subject is that the Philosopher's Stone is something that you create inside your body. And it's an energy center that powers up your ability to transcend the matrix.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so you're like a battery, and once that battery is full, kind of like in the matrix, to sort of go with that analogy, you can not only do miracles in the matrix, but you can go beyond the matrix or change the matrix.
That sounds pretty awesome. That's again what Neil was doing kind of in the movie, yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
Just on the last chapter here, I've just seen the name of it, Be a Rebel. I've kind of been a rebel all my life. I don't like, authority and, playing the game.
Right.
What do you mean by being a rebel?
Well, that chapter, obviously, as the ultimate, the final chapter in the book, comes after a long discussion of various things having to do with mortality and immortality and walking this path. In a nutshell, I mean that you can choose to pay the ferryman, right? you can sort of bow down to death and taxes as the ultimate realities, or you can have a much more radical viewpoint towards these types of things and find another way. And what I'm doing there is really encouraging people to think way, way, way outside the box.
So a lot of people these days are discovering through the birth certificate that we are owned essentially by the Crown Corporation, and maybe they want to become sovereign, and that means, I guess, listening to a lot of truthers and looking at the law and stuff like that, which are all kind of man-made, things using black magic letters as sigils and stuff. But that seems to be the only way to not pay the ferryman if you want, because essentially all of these taxes are going to fund wars and stuff. And we have to ask ourselves, are we want to be complicit in that kind of thing? So do you think that's a good thing for people to do, is to stop funding our own controllers through these methods of, we say, becoming sovereign?
I'm pretty well versed in a lot of the sovereignty concepts, and that's something that I studied for years when I was in my own truther phase. And honestly, I just have never seen any real good come out of it in terms of people's lives. I've seen a lot of looshing going on and people worrying and doing all of these steps and sometimes getting really screwed because, all they have to do is change something in the Matrix. So there's for Anna, who doesn't like movies or the Matrix. And then so they just change something, and then all of a sudden there's different rules, and you've screwed up, and you're in prison or something like that. So and also the sovereignty movement is largely about, still, it's like looking outside yourself for I don't know, for validation or something like that, when only you can really validate yourself, and only you can declare your own inner sovereignty. And that's ultimately the only thing that matters, because the inner can control the outer.
Okay. So, there is some aspect of giving these people money. But you would just say, just pay the money, but I'm
actually not saying that. There are people doing amazing work in creating workarounds to what you're describing, who are not, who do not agree with the sovereignty approach at all. And they're just using a kind of walking between the raindrops approach that gives you freedom to do your thing without having all the hassle and all the flag waving that comes with a lot of the sovereignty movements.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I know a lady, I've interviewed her a couple of times, called Stacey Wilkinson. She does something similar to that, and gets results, I guess. What do you think about what you would call psychic people and tarot readers? Again, do people go to them? Is that a way of giving your power away? Do these people have any right to tell others their fortune? They can influence their lives. What's your view on that? Or do you think, I know a shaman who does tarot readings, for instance. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think, when I was studying creative writing and then teaching English for years, there was this notion that you could be a good editor for a writer only if you helped them tell the story they were trying to tell. And as soon as you started trying to give them a story to tell, or have them tell your story, then you crossed a line. And I think the same thing applies to a lot of tarot readers and fortune tellers. There are good ones out there who basically help people shape their own desires and empower them to do so. And they don't overstep that line. And there are lots of others, I believe, who overstep that line. And I think that's super dangerous, because that can put you in such a box. I've written about the death sentence of diagnosis before, and how, you might be just fine, and I mean, the funny thing is, let's say prostate cancer for men. A lot of men have prostate cancer and they don't even know it, and maybe they die of it at like 80 years old. And so they were better off just not knowing it all along and living their lives. It's the point I'm getting at. But once the diagnosis comes in and then the treatment that it arises from the diagnosis, and the nocebo effect, once those things are kicking in, then your life has been changed by an external evaluation that has a tremendous amount of power over you.
Yeah, the NHS here sends over 50-year-old men a thing to have put some shit in basically and send it back to them, or they want to test for things, and you're right, that just gives them a way in basically, and the body can be taking them and then maybe healing itself, throughout life, and various things that they could cut open and just diagnose, and then we're in their system, and it's never usually a good end.
Right. I mean, I'm not trying to play the role of doctor here. I'm not, diagnosing or recommending or anything like that. I'm just simply saying that, diagnosis has become this kind of, I don't know, this knee-jerk response to all situations medical. And very often it's extremely harmful, and it's what ends up killing people, in my point of view.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book about a shaman. If you go and see a shaman, he'll ask you some questions like, when did you stop dancing? Or, when did you last laugh? Or something, those kind of questions. And they're known as healers, as opposed to a doctor would just doctor you with chemicals, basically. So, yeah, just needs to be more healing going on, I think, rather than doctoring.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying that if you needed someone to set a broken bone, or you had, if you needed to have emergency brain surgery, that you should go to a shaman. I'm saying, do what needs to be done, but look at some of the repercussions around getting a kind of casual diagnosis when you feel in pretty good health.
Yeah.
Because it's really taking your mind potentially and turning it against you, so that, you manifest the disease that you're claimed to have. I mean, it's very circular. It's back to this whole argument, or this whole notion that we are somehow creating our experience through application of the power of our attention.
Yeah, which again you do talk about in the book, because be careful where you pay attention.
Yes. And the whole idea of that being currency, that's the energetic current, the currency that powers the vessel of our lives and of this reality on the dark sea of awareness.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you've written quite a few books, and I think your next one might be a novel. Am I right in saying?
Well, I do plan to publish a book. It's a novel called Beginner's Luke that I started serializing a couple decades ago almost. And I didn't know how to bring it out into the world, and it's been finished for a long time, but I just haven't released it. I only brought out three volumes, and then I kind of pulled those, and I've been waiting to bring it back out, because it's really, in many ways, it is my definitive book on these subjects, even though it's a novel, because it's all about the immense power of the imagination and the way that we go around imagining our life into existence.
Yeah, so that sounds quite interesting. Will that be coming out soon?
I don't know how soon. It could come out next year. If everything lines up, it can come out next year. Right now, I'm focused on getting as many people to read and review Get Out of Here Alive as possible. So please go to saulluckman.substack.com and find a link to the book, and just go download it for free. And then provide your review. It's just my goal is just to get a lot of people reading it, to create a conversation around it. I've had some really good editorial reviews. I've had some pretty well-known authors, reviewing it, and very favorably. And so, but I want more people to chime in and just provide an honest review in exchange for a free download.
I certainly think the ideas in the book are worth people spending time to contemplate, taking your power back and creating your own reality, for want of a better expression. And to me, is all good, and what people need to be doing, and taking away, energy from the narratives that are put out there. You're also a painter. You paint quite a lot, and on the Substack there's some links to your paintings. Yeah. I'll just share a couple. This one here's a Crow Rising one. What's this kind of avatar you use? Crow Rising. What's that all about?
Yeah, I talk about that in my book, Potentiate Your DNA, how when I was sick, which I mentioned earlier, and I kind of went on my own vision quest into the desert of New Mexico, I just began encountering crows everywhere. And I began having almost like conversations or exchanges with what I determined or was able to ascertain was my spirit animal, and it was actually trying to help me get well. And so ultimately it did by steering me on a path of sound healing and energy work that reset my energy blueprint and allowed me to get well, and I overcame all of my allergies and dysfunctions. So that was I talk about that in Potentiate Your DNA. This particular image, which someone bought that original years ago, but that's called crow medicine.
Was that related to, you talked about in a podcast about there was like 9 chakras, and you use some kind of sound energy to bring this 9th one, which is way above your head, and it came down through all the chakras down to the 2nd one and kind of merged with the second chakra, which is your kind of sexual energy chakra.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the second, and I talk about that second chakra in Get Out of Here Alive as well. It's called we call it the fragmentary body, and it's your major energy leak. It's where you basically spew so much energy out into the world, and that's what is being fed on by the forces that we've been talking about. So there's a way I discovered to seal the fragmentary body so that it no longer releases energy, and it also means that you're no longer vulnerable to the type of let's say mental parasites that you would have been vulnerable to earlier, because they actually get at you through your fragmentary body.
Would you say that's part of the reason why like the internet's full of pornography, and lots of men these days are choosing not to chase women because they're just on there all the time, and probably giving their energy away through that?
I don't know. I mean, I think, we've had a lot of pornography throughout history. I went to an estate sale just a day or two ago, and, there was this Asian set of pornographic porcelain little, things. It was like $4,000 for the set, and, so I mean, pornography has been part of the human story forever, really.
Okay, that's interesting. You also create music. You've got a YouTube channel with lots of good stuff. We'll listen to some tracks today. And have you got a new album out, or would you like to talk a little bit about your music?
I don't even care about focusing on that right now so much. It's like a hobby for me, So I mean, you can if you want to, but I want to keep people focused on this book, because I feel like that's really what I have to offer, that can help people's lives,
Okay, well, I would recommend folk go and check out Soul Lockman Music, and if they want to enjoy some cool tunes.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed your music. I went in and spent some time listening to that. I mean, I love the whole very the characterization through the accent that you're doing. It's really fun. I mean, it's like, wow, it's really hard to understand, but once you like tune into it, then it's got so much life and personality in it. I was really pretty blown away just by the effervescence of your material.
Yeah, I don't think many people get it, but I can't, because I can't sing. I just try to use, to say, personality, or to go the opposite way, just full on expression. And some people, well, most people probably wouldn't get it, but I'm glad that you do. You're obviously a bit of a wild man yourself.
Well, the lyrics were just hilarious at times. So yeah, I mean, I did not actually. When I was listening, I wasn't consciously connecting it to the comedian background, but I could see how they're of a piece.
Yeah, basically, I've done a couple of characters, Scottish characters, and I wrote poetry. I've got a book called Buck and Cunnifunt, and I write tales about my previous escapades in Amsterdam or Jamaica, and the Scottish vernacular, because I think it works better in that. So I just kind of continued that when I was in a phase for making those songs during that time. I don't know if I'll do it in the future, but I had a phase where I was putting that book together, and I had all these Scottish poems in it, and I just wrote in some quite serious lyrics, but I just decided to Scottishify them.
That's right. I remember years ago, was it Train Spotting? Do you remember that movie? And that, that was just really, really intense. And it was challenging to get into that brogue, it was so thick, but once you did, it was like the poetry just kind of like came singing out at you, I remember even watching something, comparatively tame, like, Outlander, you're just like, whoa, once you can hear it, it's like, it's so beautiful and amazing. I wish I could speak like that.
Well, I believe when they showed Trainspotting in America, they had to use subtitles.
Yes, I think they did. I think back in the day they actually did.
Yeah, and this is a world exclusive because there's a new prequel to Outlander coming out before the final season. It's called Blood of My Blood, and I was I was a background actor in it last year, so I wasn't allowed to tell them.
How cool! So it's coming out this coming year, or is that?
It's coming out this year sometime, yeah.
Because that'll be the prelude to the 8th and final season. Is that right?
It's a prequel to Outlander, and it sets up the final season, I think.
That is fascinating. Well, thank you for that intel. That's some good alpha.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
I froze my bollocks off.
Really? How long were you on the set?
I've done about 8 days, and there's a couple of scenes where I'm not talking, but I'm kind of with the main actors. So there should be a couple of close-ups of me at some point.
Oh man, I'm all over that. I'm gonna definitely check that out. That's great.
It looked quite cool. My old outfit, but the shoes were not designed to keep heating.
Oh really?
During the shooting, I just had to pace around constantly while they were setting up the next shot. I couldn't stand still because my feet were like ice. But anyway, hopefully it'll be worth it.
Oh, what an experience. Yeah, I've never had an experience quite like that. I'm a little jealous. That's very cool.
It was cool. So anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, people can get your book, an advanced copy, and review it if they go to, saullockman.substack.com.
Yes. Please do, and say hello. You can subscribe for free. And I just released today, actually. I made public the new type of inner alchemy, energy and body work that I've been developing for a while. It's called Pragmalchemy, and so you can learn more about that on my Substack as well.
Yeah, I had a look at that. There's it looked like a box with an Aurora Borealis or the snake eating its own tail on it.
It's a block. It's a solid cherry block that you use to you lie on it, and you can press it into your body. You can stand on it, and it creates fascial decompression. So it releases fascial adhesions in your connective tissue, and it creates more space and flexibility. It can help you heal on a physical level, but it can also create more room for you to house this energy that I've been talking about, that you draw in with your breath and your conscious attention. So you do that, you do all of these things simultaneously, and so that multitasking ends up being a shortcut to the kind of energy the energy cultivation that we've been talking about in this discussion.
So that particular block is different from another block of wood that has special qualities in it.
Yeah, it's not like it's magic or anything. It's just a certain size, and it's rounded on the edges and the corners so that you don't hurt yourself when you're pressing it into under your rib cage, for example.
Right.
Or, into the whole like psoas area and decompressing that area where you have all of these adhesions, or you're lying on it on your sternum, your breastplate, you're like totally on the block breathing, and you're using resistance breathing to draw in all of this energy. And resistance breathing, it's called pratiloma in Ayurveda. It's been shown to have all kinds of health benefits just by itself. So you're doing a lot of resistance breathing and sucking in that energy, and then you're taking it down into your your belly button area, which is called the cauldron in this work. It's an alchemical term, and you're storing it and packing it in your cauldron, and that's where you're creating your philosopher's stone.
Right, so you're selling that block along with teachings on how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, people can do it without the block. They can take like a hand towel and they can roll it up very, very tightly and get some of the same benefits. It's not as efficient. It's not as powerful. These fascia, these strands of connective tissue, they adhere to bone, and so they attach and they pull like catgut. They're really strong, and they pull you out of alignment and they compress areas. So when you can get all the way down to the bone, which you need time and pressure, so you need something hard enough to create that pressure, then you can get those fascial adhesions to release from the bone, and it creates an expansion in your whole structure.
So can people access that through your Substack, or do they have to subscribe to your Substack to get that?
Right now we're doing what we're calling a jump starter campaign. So you can access the first 3 exercises just through the website by either paying for one of the bundles that where those exercises are available. The Ouroboros, which is the wood block, is available through that as well. So right now this is exclusive, and then eventually those exercises will be available on the Substack itself in more of a public way. I want to make those free down the road for people just to experience and experiment with. And then after the first 3 exercises, there will be a paid option to keep going with the series of exercises. But you can do so much and spend so much time just with the first 3 exercises. You could literally spend months, if not years, just doing those and cultivating your energy.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, and best of luck with the book, and we'll maybe catch up again in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me on again, and I look forward to seeing you in the Outlanders series or the prequel.
Yeah, if I'll send you some pictures if you want.
I would love that.
Okay, cool, man. So thanks for your time, and everyone else, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now. Take care. Bye-bye.